Thank you, Madam Chair, or Madam Speaker, sorry. I'm pleased to rise in the House today to speak on Bill C-47. As been mentioned before, it's an act to amend the Export-Import Permit Act and the Criminal Code. This bill will officially bring Canada into line with the UN Arms Trade Treaty. Also, as everybody's been talking about, the AT&T. In a news release issued on April 13th, after the bill was tabled, the government stated, and I quote, "The AT&T is about protecting people from arms," end of quote. And we've been hearing all day today from our friends across about people being harmed. Who does the government want to protect? That makes me wonder. Law-abiding firearms owners and merchants, they're not a threat. In my experience as an RCMP officer, most weapons-related crimes in Canada are committed with firearms that are obtained illegally or usually stolen. Mr. Speaker, the history of firearms in Canada goes back as far as the country itself. Let's be fair. The Dominion of Canada Rifle Association was founded in 1868, and I don't think there's a province in Canada today that does not have a branch of that association in their provinces. We have hunters who rely on firearms to provide food for their families, as their forefathers did, as the earliest settlers in Canada did. We have farmers who rely on firearms to protect their livestock, as the early settlers did. Sorry, I'm having trouble with that word, Madam Speaker. We have sport shooters who rely on firearms to compete in competitions in the same way as a competitive tennis player relies on his or her tennis racket. And we have firearm collectors who seek guns in the same way stamp collectors search for stamps. The firearms community is large and a diverse group in Canada. These are law-abiding and responsible Canadians.
Exactly.
Yet this government seems to think they need to protect people from firearms. And there's a lot of fear-mongering in here today about all the deaths. Somebody just quoted shortly before me, 80 women were raped because it was done at gunpoint. 2,000 people are dying a day because of gunpoint. But let's really look at what we're at here. They failed to realize that firearms have been part of many Canadian livelihoods for decades. Now, as the previous speaker stated, I believe that we need to look at international gun control. We need to protect the flow of illegal firearms. But most importantly, we must listen and hear from Canadians. And that is one thing that the Liberal government has failed to do, listen to Canadians. When one of these law-abiding firearm owners or a Canadian company purchases a weapon outside of Canada and wishes to import it across the border, they must declare it, of course, to Canada Border Service Agency. There's a great deal of documentation that is required, and all this bill will do is add unnecessary layers of bureaucracy, red tape, and more cost. It's been mentioned in this House many times today that Canada is probably one of the leading countries in the world with gun control. In fact, we met 26 of the 28 standards that the ATT. In fact, we're probably much more regulated, and we have better gun control, quality control, export control, import control than ATT will ever have. Our previous Conservative government dealt with the UN Arms Treaty when it came into force in December of 2014. Its purpose, as we all have heard, is to regulate international trade of arms so they are not used to support terrorism or international organized crime. And I don't think there's anybody in this room who doesn't support that, Madam Chair. I don't know about you, but I don't think Farmer Joe in northern Saskatchewan is supporting international organized crime when he imports a rifle. Whether he intends to use it for hunting, protecting his livestock, or sport shooting. I think we're going a little bit overboard with this bill, Madam Speaker, and that's why so many of us have stood up on this side of the House and are speaking about our concerns. We're speaking for the average Canadian because they want to be heard, and that side does not want to hear them. We have to speak for them. Our former Prime Minister, Harper, requested that civilian firearms be removed from this treaty in 2014, yet the UN ignored the request to respect the interests of Canadians and refused to remove civilians from the language of the treaty. So, what did our previous government do? We didn't sign it.
Good.
We stood up for Canadians. That is what this government is failing to do. We refused to sign the treaty at that time. Yet here we go, with a government ready to sign a document that is not good for firearms owners, does nothing to improve the safety of Canadians.
Nothing.
Yet this is my opinion, and my colleagues across from me may disagree. But let me remind them of something. Former Foreign Affairs Minister Stephen Dion even admitted this in his own press release issued in June of 2016. To paraphrase it, Madam Chair, it stated that Canada already meets the vast majority of the obligations, and the treaty was designed to bring other countries up to the high standard that Canada already applies through its export control regime. Why are we going where we're going? During the summer, I attended the Edson Rod and Gun Club range. It's located in a remote part of my riding, and the reason it's way out there in the end of my riding because it's one of the longest ranges in Canada. I went there because there was going to be a group called Got Your Six at the range that weekend. They were there last year, and I was there last year too. This is a group of current and retired military, police, firemen, first responders, and civilians. They're a great organization. You may not have heard of them, Madam Speaker. They are a charity shooting competition group that raise funds and create awareness of post-traumatic stress disorders. Last year, they gathered for their first competitive shooting tournament. It was a popular event. I can tell you, it was amazing to watch the military and civilian marksmen hit a target a mile away time after time. But more astounding to see was the camaraderie between men and women, a brotherhood. Yes, by shooting weapons in competition. They were also gathered there to help talk about and help others with post-traumatic stress disorders. That's only a small group of thousands and thousands of Canadians that either sport shoot, hunt, or collect. This year, the same shoot quadrupled in attendance. Men and women came from across Canada, some for the competitiveness, many for the camaraderie and fellowship they all shared as current and former guardians of our country and the world. These people are not a threat. Even though we had all types of weapons there, these people are just small representation, as I said earlier, of thousands who enjoy shooting at local ranges or hunting or collecting a firearm. This bill does not help them in any way. It only complicates things for them. Before we spend a fortune on tax dollars limiting more rights and freedoms, is there a pressing, urgent need for Canada to join the UN Arms Trade Treaty? No. I can tell you from experience that this treaty puts undue hardships on law-abiding gun owners and merchants. Canada already implements and complies with the vast majority of the obligations. We are a very safe and law-abiding country. Thank you. So why this unnecessary change? Why are we punishing responsible firearm owners with this legislation if we already meet the vast majority of the treaty obligation? I can agree with the overall goal, which aims to prevent illegal transfer of arms that fuel conflict, encourage terrorism, and support organized crime. However, I'm concerned that this government has not consulted lawful gun owners, which is not a big surprise. Or maybe it is a big surprise, considering the number of consultations they have held on almost every other issue, or so they say. Because of this lack of consultation, Liberals are moving forward with an armed treaty that does not respect the legitimate trade or use of hunting and sporting firearms in this country. Madam Speaker, I was alarmed at a statement made by the Secretary of State in the opening remarks regarding this bill. And he talked about we must lead by example. This country has, but these other remarks scared me. Even more robust legislation to come. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Yes, Madam Speaker. What I'm trying to understand from my colleague's speech is where he actually stands on in terms of voting on this particular bill. He spent about 15 seconds saying that, of course, he supports the goal of Bill C-47, and then spent 9.5 minutes talking about something that is not an issue, something that we care deeply about. We care about and fully support the lawful use of firearms by hunters, the progressive, thank you for that term, use by hunters, by fishermen, by sports shooters. That is not an issue. It's not an issue with this bill. So what I'm interested, I respect his strong feelings about the subject, but what I'm interested in knowing is he going to vote for or against this bill? And knowing that, we will be the last country, of course, to join the G7 and NATO partners and allies in terms of ratifying this treaty, how will he explain this to Canadians when he decides, if he's not going to vote for it, why he did not vote for it? I'd be interested in his answer.
Yeah, member for Yellowhead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm quite willing to give him my answer, and it would be no. And it's not because I don't believe that we should participate. I believe that this government, the Liberal government, did not consult with lawful gun owners and are ramming this through, shoving it down the throats of Canadians without proper consultation. That I cannot stand for. And I will stand up for the lawful gun owners in my riding and across Canada that are legal, law-abiding citizens. Thank you. And the other thing I'd just like to finish.
Well, sorry, we're going to questions and comments now.
All right.
We have to allow for a few more questions and comments. The honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Madam Speaker, through you, does the member agree that we should reduce our trade with states who abuse human rights?
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
I believe that Canada has a very robust system in place to ensure that we negotiate trade agreements and deals with other countries. I believe that we have showed due diligence in the past, and we will show due diligence in the future in how we deal with other countries regarding trade relations. Thank you.
Then comments, the honourable member for Durham.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague. I know very well the group got your 6, and it was lovely to hear the impact they're having for our military veterans, first responders, and as a Mountie veteran himself, he knows this and wears it on his sleeve. What the problem here is, Madam Speaker, and the Minister of Transport was much more eloquent than the Parliamentary Secretary MP for Fredericton, who calls even asking a question about this bogus. They're actually incorrect. The United States will not fully implement this treaty, so the Minister was incorrect in those statements. But more importantly, the fact that the treaty rejected excluding law-abiding owners. So they all say it's not in there, and the Parliamentary Secretary said even asking the question is bogus. The fact it was excluded means that you would imply that it could be collected from individualized owners or their brokers or both. These are genuine questions. I know they're not issued in the talking points that the Liberals are going by today, but to suggest that even having a question about this when law-abiding owners haven't been consulted, could that member tell this House how that sort of language, bogus, phony, questions from rural Canadians on this issue being treated in that way by the government creates divisions and resurrects the feelings of the Liberal gun registry?
The honourable member for Yellowhead has 45 seconds to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's quite easy. I probably intermingled with 200 or 300 people at the Got Your 6 thing. People that went out and risked their lives to protect people around the world, to protect Canadians. You tell me that what they want to do on a recreational basis and their concerns, because a lot of them had concerns over this act, is bogus. That's why I'm standing up defending their actions. These are law-abiding Canadians. We should respect their concerns, and we have to stand up for them.